Hello, my name is Beth Mahaffey. Welcome to the New Moon series. Today we're going to talk about the historical practice and debate of the new moon. The New Moon series contains 5 parts. The last time we met, we covered the new moon's significance, and today we will cover the historical practice and debate of the new moon. The third is astronomy. The fourth is calendars, including the Metonic cycle. And the fifth is a calendar for Yahweh's people. Now, if you have missed the first session, you really need to go back and see the significance of the new moon, because it is a session that you will not want to miss. The goals of this series are to teach the significance of the new moon, to fully educate Yahweh's people who desire to walk in obedience to his commandments regarding the new moon's role in observing the feasts of Yahweh, to introduce and address the debate over conjunction versus new crescent moon, to equip Yahweh's people with the astronomical knowledge necessary to evaluate subject matter regarding the new moon and the various proposed calendars currently being used by his people, to propose a calendar that Yahweh's people worldwide can follow without reliance on other assemblies, and to encourage unity and observance of holy convocations around the world. In this presentation, we will look at the historical Jewish practice of sighting the new moon, and we will address the debate regarding the definition of the new moon that is present within the Hebraic roots community. Along the way, we'll look at several witnesses to determine what the new moon is and what we're going to be looking for. We will look at the definitions of English, Hebrew, and Greek terms, scripture, and extra biblical sources. As we begin this presentation, we're going to begin by looking at a few Hebrew terms for moon. The Hebrew root yarach takes 2 forms. Yarach, which means a period of time or a month, and yareach, which also means moon. It's the actual lesser light that was created by God. It helped mark out the seasons and the signs, festivals, days, and months of the year, as well as giving light to the earth. The second Hebrew term for moon is chadash. Chadash takes 3 forms. The first one is a verb, which is pronounced chadash, and it means to be new, renew, or repair, especially when it's talking about items. The physical moon, yareach, is renewed, chadash, each month. The second form of chadash is an adjective. It can be chadash or chadashah, and both mean new or renewed. The new covenant, known as the Brit Chadashah, is a renewed covenant. The third form is a noun, and it's pronounced chodesh, which means new moon or month. Most of the time it's translated as month, and sometimes it is translated as new moon. In astronomy, new moon means one of the 4 principal phases of the moon, occurring when it lies between the earth and the sun. In British English, new moon means the moon when it appears as a narrow waxing crescent, or the time at which this occurs. In American English, new moon means the first phase of the moon when it is between the earth and the sun, with its dark side toward the earth. It's followed by the waxing crescent moon, or crescent phase. It's also referred to as the time of the new moon. It appears there is a difference of opinion between Americans, Brits, and astronomers as to what the new moon is and when it takes place. It's either a narrow waxing crescent or lunar conjunction. In astronomy, conjunction is when the moon is between the sun and the earth, so that the moon appears completely dark to the inhabitants of the earth. A full moon occurs when the earth is between the sun and moon, so that the moon is fully visible. Some Torah observant believers who agree with the conjunction as being the correct definition of the new moon use Psalm 81:3 as support for their position. Bear in mind the literary style of the Psalms. It often contains couplets that either parallel the original thought or expand it, or oppose the original thought. And we need to figure out which of these is going on in this verse. Let's take time now to break down Psalm 81:3 and see what it means. Now, Psalm 81:3 is Psalm 81:4 in the Hebrew version. It says, "Blow the trumpet at the time of the new moon, v'chodesh." At the full moon, or appointed time, which is bak keseh, on our solemn feast day. Now, no one really takes issue with the Hebrew translation of part A of this verse. The debate is over the proper interpretation of part B of this verse. Notice the difference in part B of these two English versions. In the KJV, Psalm 81:3, part B says, "In the time appointed on our solemn feast day." In the New King James Version, it says, "At the full moon on our solemn feast day." Some people have a problem with the translation of the Hebrew word keseh. In part B, it says bak keseh, which means at the full moon or appointed time. Note that the Hebrew word moed is not used here for appointed time, but that doesn't necessarily mean this definition or translation can't be used. It's just not exactly what is expected. According to the BDB, keseh in Psalm 81:4 means full moon. It is the opposite of Bachodesh in Psalm 81:4, which means at the new moon. Those who oppose the definition for keseh focus on the root word kasah, which means to cover, conceal, or hide, which implies conjunction. The main difference between keseh and kasah is the difference in vowel pointings. These two words are just not the same. The Masoretes vowel pointed keseh differently to specifically distinguish it from kasah for future generations. Now, if you are troubled by a Hebrew root that gives opposite meanings, consider another Hebrew word, yarash. Yarash can mean to possess or dispossess depending on the context of the passage. And either way, the vowels of this word are the same. We see possess or inherit and dispossess or disinherit many times in the book of Numbers. We have to consider the full context of Psalm 81:3 to know which meaning of kaf samek he is correct. Some people have a problem with those who say the last phrase of Psalm 81:3 must refer to conjunction or the hiddenness of the new moon instead of the full moon. The reason they have a problem with it is because Yom Teruah, which occurs on a new moon, is not a chag. Part B says, on our solemn feast day, which is Chag Genu. Now in this chart, I've tried to show you which appointed times are Chagim, which is the plural form of Chag, and which are holy convocations, or Midrash Kodesh. You'll notice that Chag HaMatzot is a Chag, so is Chag HaShavuot and Chag HaSukkot. A lot of times when we speak about these feasts, we drop the word Chag and we refer to them as the Feast of Unleavened Bread, or HaMatzot, or Shavuot, or HaKippurim, or HaKippur. Okay? The other appointed times, such as Shabbat, Pesach, Yom HaBikurim, which is first fruits, Yom Teruah, which is trumpets, Yom HaKippurim, and Yom Shemini Atzeret, are not Chagim. Chag HaShavuot would not be during a conjunction, a new moon, or a full moon. There's potentially 3 to 9 days between Shavuot and the next full moon. Therefore, Psalm 81:3b is not referring to Chag HaShavuot. There are 2 other feasts that we mentioned, Hamatzot and HaSukkot, which occur on the 15th of the months of Nisan and Tishrei respectively, which is about the time a full moon occurs. Remember, Bat Keseh means in the full moon. On Hamatzot and HaSukkot, the moon is not in its hiddenness. Therefore, it's not during a conjunction. So obviously, Psalm 81:3b is referring to the full moon of either Hamatzot or HaSukkot. It's quite likely that the second half of this verse is referring to Chag HaSukkot, which is in the same season and month as Yom Teruah. Other references in Psalm 81 are referring to the time in which Israel was in the wilderness, actually living in Sukkot, or booths. Therefore, we can eliminate Chag Hamatzot as a possibility. Now let's look at the Greek Septuagint. Psalm 84 in the Septuagint is the same as Psalm 81:3 in the New King James and LXE. Psalm 84 says, Salpisate in Neamenia Salpingi, which is blow the trumpet at the new moon. In Eusemo, Hemera, Heortes, Hamon, means in the glorious day of your feast. At least that's how it's translated. Now, the Greek word Neamenia means new moon. It comes from 2 words, neos, which means new, and main, which means month or moon. Freiberg translates eusemos as strictly of something that gives an easily recognizable sign, hence clear, distinct. And if it's talking about language, it's meaning intelligible. Abbott Smith translates eusemos as conspicuous or clear to the understanding, or distinct. A moon in the conjunction phase is just not an easily recognizable sign. It's not clear and it's not distinct. But a full moon is clear, distinct, conspicuous, and easily recognizable. I do not know why the English version is translated in the glorious, other than the fact that a full moon is a glorious sight. Clearly, this verse is not referring to conjunction. The Greek Septuagint version obviously supports the vowel pointing of the Masoretes. Let's see what the rabbis have to say about this verse. We're going to look at Midrash Rabbah, volume Leviticus. Now this is Agadah, or narrative text, in which the writer is inviting discussion and offering explanations or elaborations of the text. Rabbi Berechiah opened his discourse with the text, blow the horn at the new moon when it is concealed for our feast day. The footnote here is number 2, which means, or says, at the full moon. But is there not new moon every month? Or will you answer, when is it concealed? And are not all new moons concealed? Or will you answer, for our feast day? Is not Nisan a month in which the moon is concealed and has a festival of its own? This is followed by footnote number 3, which says, so how do we know which new moon is meant? So they're asking the same questions that we were previously. Citation number 2 in Midrash Rabbah readily admits that the Hebrew word in question, keseh, literally means full moon, yet they are saying concealed instead. They also repeatedly say the new moon is concealed. This is most likely because of the issue we've been discussing, and this rabbi is likely reading from a non-pointed text. Now let's see how this quote is concluded on the following slide. The meaning can only be as follows. Which month is it when the moon is concealed and has a festival, and the festival falls on that very day of new moon? You will not find any other than the month of Tishrei. Now, one thing I do want to point out as we're looking at some of these texts is noting when these were written. Rabbah, Leviticus is probably from the 3rd to 5th century, Common Era. Okay? All right, the Midrash Rabbah for Leviticus notes the two meanings of this root, kasa. It takes the view of hiddenness for new moon and ultimately says the first half of this verse is about Yom Teruah, whose month is referred to in the second half of the verse. Remember, their footnote acknowledges keseh as meaning full moon and not concealed. So is the new moon concealed or not? This literature is written during a time period when the Jews are observing a new moon based on conjunction. We'll see more on that shortly. For now, let's look at Midrash Rabbah again, but now in the volume for Exodus. And Rabbah Exodus is from the 9th to 11th century. The moon begins to shine on the 1st of Nisan and goes on shining till the 15th day, when her disk becomes full. From the 15th till the 30th day, her light wanes till on the 30th it is not seen at all. Now, as you can see, this quote is not describing conjunction on the 1st of Nisan. It's describing a new crescent moon. So that's totally opposite of what Midrash Rabbah for Leviticus said. I really get the impression here that the Jews in the early centuries of the Common Era couldn't make up their minds whether or not the new moon is concealed or visible. How about you? All right, in this next slide, what I want to do is I want to compare all three languages, English, Hebrew, and Greek. Okay? Psalm 81:3 in English, blow the shofar at the time of the new moon. Hebrew is 81:4, Tik'u v'chodesh shofar. Psalm 80, verse 4, salpisate in Neamaniya salpingi. When the moon is full on our feast day, bak keseh leyom hagenu is Hebrew. Greek is in Eusemo hemera heortes hemon. Based on all that we've discussed to this point, my expanded translation would be, blow the shofar on Yom Teruah in the month of Tishrei, when a clear, distinct full moon takes place during Chag HaSukkot on Tishrei the 15th. Now this wraps up our discussion on the definition of new moon and the debate of the meaning of keseh. Let's now shift our focus to the historical practice regarding the new moon. In Yeshua's day, witnesses of the new crescent moon testified to a high court who sanctified the new crescent moon each month. Today, astronomers call the conjunction, when no light or moon can be seen, the new moon. This causes a lot of confusion among God's people today. That's why we're having this presentation after all. Actually, there are 3 time periods in history regarding the sighting of the new moon. The first time period in history regarding the sighting of the new crescent moon was until the Tainadic period, until approximately 10 to 220 Common Era. During this time, the new crescent moon was actually sighted and reported to the High Court. Now let's look at some quotes regarding this time period. In the Babylonian Talmud, tract Rosh Hashanah, it says, each Israelite took a torch in his hand and ascended to the roof of his house. Great feasts were made for the witnesses in order to induce them to come frequently. How were the witnesses examined? The sun never faces the concave of the crescent or the concave of a rainbow. If the witnesses say, we have seen the reflection of the moon in the water or through a metal mirror or in the clouds, their testimony is not to be accepted. This kind of observation is what would be expected for people living in the northern hemisphere, which is where Israel is. Okay, Philo of Alexandria, who lived around 25 BCE to 50 Common Era, was a Hellenistic Jewish philosopher who lived in Alexandria in the Roman province of Egypt. He had the following to say about the new moon. The third, referring to a festival out of 10, is that which comes after the conjunction, which happens on the day of the new moon in each month. He also says, thirdly, because at that period the more powerful and important body gives a portion of necessary assistance to the less important and weaker body. For at the time of the new moon, the sun begins to illuminate the moon with a light which is visible to the outward senses, and then she displays her own beauty to the beholders. So here again we see that Philo is saying that the moon was visible at the time of the new moon. Okay, the next quote is from Kiddush HaChodesh, chapter 1, section 3. The first night when the moon is sighted in the west after being hidden is the beginning of the month. Afterwards, 29 days are counted from that day. If the moon is sighted on the night of the 30th day will be Rosh Chodesh of the following month. Kiddush HaChodesh, chapter 1, section 3 continued. If it is not sighted, Rosh Chodesh will be on the 31st day, and the 30th day will be included in the previous month. There's no need to sight the moon on the 31st night. Whether or not the moon is sighted, the new month begins that night, for there are no lunar months longer than 30 days. So basically, they were only attempting to sight the moon on 2 nights, the 29th and if necessary the 30th. If it was seen on either of these 2 nights, that night was considered the first of the month. If the moon was not seen on the 29th or 30th night, the 31st night was automatically the first day of the month. Once the high court sanctified the new moon, they sent messengers to inform the people when Rosh Chodesh was observed for Nisan, which is when Passover takes place, or Av for Tish B'Av, Elul for Rosh Hashanah, Tishrei for the fall festivals, Kislev for Hanukkah, and Adar, which is when Purim takes place. Before this practice, they used to light bonfires until the Samaritans started lighting bonfires at incorrect times, which caused a lot of confusion. The original bonfires allowed the people to celebrate the festivals on the appropriate day. Now, the second time period in history regarding the sighting of the new moon was through the Amoric period and into the Gaonic period. The sightings of the new moon were gradually replaced by calculations which were made to determine the time of conjunction based on the sighting of the new moon. Now, here are some quotes for this time period. Kiddush HaChodesh, chapter 1, section 6. The high court would make calculations in a manner resembling the calculations of the astronomers, who know the location of the stars and their paths in their orbits. They would perform careful research to determine whether or not they would be able to sight the new moon at the appropriate time, such as the 30th night. If, according to their calculations, the judges knew that it was impossible for the moon to be sighted, they would not sit in session on the 30th day, nor would they await the arrival of witnesses. If witnesses came, they would know that they were false witnesses, or that clouds appeared to them in a form resembling the moon, but it was not the real moon. If the judges determined that it was possible to sight the moon, they would sit waiting for witnesses to come and testify throughout the entire 30th day, and if witnesses came and the court examined their testimony according to the law and verified the truth of their statements, the court would sanctify the new month. If the moon was not sighted and witnesses did not come, they would complete the 30th day, thus making the month full. Kiddush HaChodesh, chapter 2, section 4. The court would make calculations in a manner resembling the calculations of the astronomers, and would know whether the position of the moon, when it would be sighted, would be to the north of the sun or to its south, if its crescent would be wide or narrow, and the direction in which its corners would be pointed. When the witnesses came to testify, they would ask them, "Where did you see the moon? To the north or to the south of the sun? In which direction were its corners pointed? How high and how wide did it appear to you?" If their replies were suitable, their testimony was accepted. If their replies were not suitable, their testimony was not accepted. Now, if you want more of a description about what to expect when looking at the new crescent moon, you can find this in Kiddush HaChodesh, chapter 19. Now, if you read this, you need to be aware that the constellations that they mention were different at that time due to precession. And you'll learn a little bit more about precession in the section on astronomy. Kiddush HaChodesh, chapter 6, section 1 says, "When the new moon was sanctified, based on the testimony of witnesses regarding the sighting of the moon, the court would calculate the time of the conjunction of the sun and the moon in an exact manner, as the astronomers do. This enabled them to know whether or not the moon would be sighted." The first level of these calculations represent approximations of the time of the conjunction, and their accuracy is not great. This approximation of the time of the conjunction is calculated according to the mean rates of movement. The time of the conjunction, as calculated in this manner, is referred to as the malad. The phrase mean rates of movements refers to the Ptolemaic concept of planetary motion called epicycles, which is a circle within a circle. This concept has been replaced by Kepler's law of planetary motion, which is based on an elliptical orbit. The time of the conjunction, as calculated using the outdated Ptolemaic model, is referred to as the malad, which is a Hebrew term that means birth. Now, when we discuss astronomy, we'll see that conjunction is the point at which time the moon's illumination is at its lowest, and therefore it's really at the time of the moon's death and not its birth. The birth comes after the conjunction, right? Okay. Let's continue with Kiddush HaChodesh, chapter 6, section 1. The essentials of the calculations that are used when a court to sanctify the new moon based on the testimony of witnesses of the sighting of the moon does not exist. The calculations we use today are referred to as ibur. Now, I know that that translation sounded really strange, and that's because of the poor translation, so I just asked that you pardon that direct quote. Anyway, basically what the quotation is telling us is that the essentials of these calculations that were done during this time period no longer exist. Now, the High Court could sanctify the new moon if they had seen it at the end of the 29th day and before a star had emerged on the 30th night. Back in ancient times, as is still true today, the new crescent moon was not always visible at its expected time. And this can be due to factors such as landscape, rain, cloud coverage, pollution, humidity, perigee, apogee, all these kinds of things. And I know over the last several months, as we've been trying to sight the new crescent moon, we've had a lot of difficulty with major thunderstorms and clouds and things blocking our view. So it's been a very discouraging process. And so I can't imagine what it was like back then for them. I'm sure it was very similar. We now come to the third time period in history regarding the sighting of the new moon. Traditionally, Hillel II, who lived between 330 and 365 Common Era, is considered the creator of the current Hebrew calendar. Now, even though Hillel II is considered the creator of the Hebrew calendar, it was based on the 19-year Metonic cycle, which is named after a Greek astronomer named Meton. This cycle is believed to have been devised around 433 BCE, but it was already known by Babylonian astronomers. By the 12th century Common Era, the calculations for the Hillel II calendar were codified by Maimonides or Rambam in the Mishnah Torah, specifically in Kiddush HaChodesh in Sefer Zemanim. If there was a Sanhedrin in the land of Israel, the monthly calendar was established according to the sighting of the moon. Remember, the Jews were only attempting to sight the moon on 2 nights, the 29th and if necessary the 30th. If witnesses saw it on either night, that night was considered the first of the month. If the moon was not seen on the 29th or 30th night, the 31st night was automatically the first day of the month. If there is or was no Sanhedrin in the land of Israel, the monthly calendar was established according to a fixed calendar based on the Metonic cycle. Generally, Rosh Chodesh is instituted on the day of conjunction instead of the first sighting on the 29th or 30th day of the month. There are 4 non-scriptural exceptions in which the first of Tishrei is established on the day that follows conjunction or on the day after that. These exceptions are found in Kiddush HaChodesh, chapter 7, sections 1 through 8. The day of conjunction will be the day of Rosh Chodesh, Tishrei, except in the following instances. The conjunction takes place on Sunday, Wednesday, or Friday. The conjunction takes place at noon or afternoon. In an ordinary year, the conjunction takes place on the night of the 3rd day after 204 units of the 10th hour have passed or later that day. In an ordinary year that follows a leap year, the conjunction takes place on Monday, past 589 units of the 4th hour after daybreak has passed or later that day. If the conjunction occurs in one of these 4 instances, Rosh Chodesh is not established on the day of the conjunction, but rather on the day that follows or on the day following that. These non-scriptural postponement rules are not observed by all Karaite Jews. They are followed only by those who follow the Hillel II calendar. We should be observing the feasts at their appointed times, no matter what day the conjunction or new crescent moon is on. It can be extremely difficult to see the new crescent moon each month. The Jews and other ancient Near Eastern nations did not always see it. The Jews knew that they could not rely on sighting the new crescent moon on the 29th and 30th night of the month all the time. They had to have rules for when they did not see it on the 29th or 30th of the month. Remember, they were not determining the exact time of conjunction like astronomers do today. Debate between the various sects of the Jews has long taken place over when and under what circumstances to sanctify the new moon. Therefore, what we are facing today is nothing new. I believe that Yahweh does not want us to be divided on this issue. We really need to find a way to be unified on this issue as soon as possible. But before we can do that, we need to have a foundation in astronomy. So be sure to join us for the 3rd presentation in the New Moon series entitled Astronomy.